I was walking down the street and a man had his dog out. Happened to be a German Shepherd. I asked him all the correct questions about petting his dog, and he was not exactly honest. So I bent down to pet his dog, and his dog ripped my face open. And it took 100 stitches to sew my face back together. And it was a very vivid scar on an 8-year-old face. I was 27. I thought of myself as an atheist. I was very angry at God, even though God had reached me in my wounded state, in my loner state as a child, not playing with the kids, not being accepted. I would sit up on this hill. I would feel, looking at the sky, I would feel this aching, this longing, this sweetness, and this. I didn't know exactly what that was, but I was 8, 9, 10. And then when I had a car, I'd go to the beach in Santa Monica in the winter when very few people were there, and I'd walk the beach looking for this particular thing. And toward the end of the book, then he says, and you have to believe in the person of Jesus. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't. And I just tossed the book across the room, and I was really angry. And inside my heart, I just railed at God. I was like, I don't know who you are. I don't want, how could you be real anyway? I mean, there's too many people. And if there are too many people, why would you even care about me?
You're a Jew girl, and when we Christians try to convert other religion, they think Jesus is for the Jew. But talking to you, I understand being a Jew and being a Christian is two different things. And Jew people believe to the Torah, and that is the book of the law. And I bought, actually last year, I bought the Torah, I read it. I see inside they talk about Jesus. And we all know in all the Testament, Jesus was announced since the beginning. And being Jew, what do you think really stuck in Jew mind to not go through the Torah, and next step is Jesus? Why that barrier? Why the transition is not easier for them?
The church. The church did a lot of damage.
Love is reaching for the lost and for the lame. Love is reaching for the grieving and the shamed. Stretched across all time and story, calling us to come. All the burdened and the broken find their healing in the sun.
I am Jewish by birth, and I grew up in Los Angeles, California, a native born and raised there. My first few years were in an area of Los Angeles that's predominantly Jewish, is kind of like the Fairfax district. And it was a very kind of protected area. I mean, it was like, culturally, we were kind of all coming from the same place, most of us. And so everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew everybody's business and everything like that. And my mom had this thing, she put on fairy tale plays and for the whole neighborhood, and everybody would participate and the adults would come. And it's kind of like one of these snapshots of something good from my childhood, that I kind of, a nugget that I've held on to at different times, in those plays, my mom and my older sister, my brother, we would participate, and we would, make the sets and costumes. And my my sister was always the evil queen and the wicked witch, which at the time I quite enjoyed. And I was always the princess, which I even enjoyed more. And I think it's funny because, I think God has different ways of speaking to us even before we come more officially to him, more formally know him by name. Or yeah. And thinking, enjoying the business of being a princess at that time was meaningful to me. And I think everybody can, even in difficult moments, we can find some moments of the goodness that the life can be, some of the goodness that the life can be. And that was that for me. And we moved when I was 8, and it was a very substantial move, even though it wasn't a lot of distance. We moved to an area that was very unlike the Fairfax district. My parents were, they had a flower shop. My dad was in the business for 50 years doing flowers. I grew up working on roses all during the holidays, cleaning roses, and all learning all about cut flowers, when I was growing up. And so they moved to a better house, all that kind of stuff. Very different neighborhood though. And before I had a chance to make some friends, something very difficult happened in my life, and it really went to forming the rest of my life. And again, I think we all have moments like this. It's much like what you were saying, Garth. You tell your story, and other people find their story in your story. I find this true also. So I was walking down the street, and a man had his dog out. It happened to be a German Shepherd. And I love animals, and I loved dogs. We had 2 little mutts. And I asked him all the correct questions about petting his dog, and he was not exactly honest. So I bent down to pet his dog, and his dog ripped my face open. And it took 100 stitches to sew my face back together. And it was a very vivid scar on an 8-year-old face. And yeah. So it took about a month to heal. I was in the hospital for a little over a week, or maybe 6 days, 6 or 7 days, something like that. Yeah, anyway. And then it took like over a month to heal enough to go back to school, but it was very, very visible. And I was the new kid, and I was called Scarface. And I was called Scarface for the next 3 years, every day that I can remember. And it was at school, or it was on the block, or whatever. And my mom didn't really know how to answer that for me. And I didn't know what to do with it, because it looked like truth. When I looked in the mirror, to me, it looked like truth. Right. And I didn't have any other court of appeal, so to speak, for it. So I became it. I became what a Scarface is, which, I got real good at being ugly and defending myself all the time, or hiding from people. I remember being in the drugstore and hiding, and yeah, so I grew into all of that. I was ugly. I was not of any value. I grew up hating myself, hating my looks, and not making any peace with myself, and often treating myself like trash. And I didn't understand any of that. I was just trying to protect myself. And I, of course, wounded people, as has been said many times. Wounded people wound people. And I was no exception. I was definitely that. And I hurt a lot of people, even as I damaged myself more by my choices, made from my filters of how I saw myself. And I was 27. I was 27. I thought of myself as an atheist. I was very angry at God, even though God had reached me in my wounded state, in my loner state as a child, not playing with the kids, not being accepted. I would sit up on this hill and I would feel looking at the sky, I would feel this aching, this longing, this sweetness, and this combined together.
Right.
And I would, what?
I said, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would come up on the hill to look for that. I didn't know exactly what that was, but I was 8, 9, 10. And then when I had a car, I'd go to the beach in Santa Monica in the winter when very few people were there. And I'd walk the beach looking for this particular thing. And, but I went to college in Boston and my brother died at 18. And it was a very difficult death thing for me, all of it. There was nothing good in it. My parents split apart, all of this. And I decided, whoever you are, I'm done, But it's interesting because at that point, that's when God began to engage me in a whole other way. And a friend from high school, also Jewish, he gave me The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. And I was a big fantasy person.
Mm-hmm.
So I read The Great Divorce avidly. I mean, it's a very short book, but it was like, oh, this is amazing, and I really loved it and everything, except I got very convicted by one of the characters.
Oh.
And one of the characters, the bishop, I think his name was a very good arguer. He loved to argue, and so he's arguing with this spirit of his old friend who was a drunkard, but came to Jesus somehow. And he's arguing with this guy, and the old friend is saying, we don't need to argue anymore. You can just come and see God. All you need to do is, believe enough to walk with me to go see God. We're not about arguing here. He has this opportunity. I mean, The Great Divorce is this premise that these spirits, I don't know if they're in purgatory or hell. I mean, I guess you would assume maybe they're in some way stationed between, again, it's a fantasy. But the idea is they have this opportunity. They have this one more opportunity. And they all talk themselves out of it. Well, almost all of them talk themselves out of it, including the bishop, who would rather argue than go see, And I'm like, no, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. But I was like, yeah, I would do that. I would absolutely do that. And I was so convicted. And so that was uncomfortable for me. And then an old boyfriend he had come to the Lord. He was also Jewish and he had come to the Lord. And he gave me Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis when he saw I was interested in C.S. Lewis. And I thought, Mere Christianity. So I started reading it, and now I'm like, oh yeah, I believe there's a right and a wrong. I believe there's fairness, because he makes his argument from this point. Why do we have this sense that something is fair and something is not fair? Why do we have this? And he makes this whole argument, he makes this whole case. And toward the end of the book, then he says, and you have to believe in the person of Jesus. And I'm like, oh, no, I don't. And I just tossed the book across the room and I was really angry. And inside my heart, I just like railed at God. I was like, I don't know who you are. I don't want, how could you be real anyway? I mean, there's too many people. And if there are too many people, why would you even care about me? Why would you even care about me anyway? I'm just one person and there are billions of people, and what does it matter? And, I was really angry on my brother died and my parents split apart, and I hate myself anyway, and all this stuff. And at that point, I'd given up a child for adoption, and you name it, I'd done it, kind of. So anyway, I'm with my boyfriend. And I say this because God will meet us anywhere. He will meet us anywhere. He doesn't give a rip where you are. He will meet us anywhere. The profane place becomes a holy place because he shows up.
Right.
Because he's holy. So I'm in bed. I'm in bed with him, and we're at my place. And by the way, he's my husband. And I'm in bed there, and I wake up in the middle of the night. He's sleeping. And I wake up in the middle of the night, and it's my room. I'm living in a guest house, and out of nowhere, I feel this love, and this love just like comes into every part of me. It just penetrates every part of me. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing I've ever felt like it. There's no shadow in this love. There's there's only this love. That's all there is. And in the moment I feel this love, I can't not know it's God. It is God. And there's no opportunity for me to know other than this. This is God. And in the moment that it reaches my consciousness, my brain, it's gone. This presence, it's gone. And I'm left with this, what just happened here? Kind of thing. Whoa, wait a minute, And so I try to wake up Michael, and Michael's like, and then I tell him, but Michael's running from God. He doesn't want anything to do with God right now. He's a nice Irish Catholic boy. And so he doesn't want anything to do with God, but he's running. So he's not in this. So the next morning I talk to my best friend who's Jewish also, and I tell her all about it. And she says, that's your subconscious or your superconscious or your unconscious. And I'm like, I don't think so. This did not happen from inside me. This thing came from outside in me. Okay, that was from outside in me. And I realized it as I was talking to her, I realized I just took a step over a threshold. I am not an atheist. I am not an agnostic. I believe he exists. Mm. I'm going to be really honest. I have to believe he exists. But then it took me another 9 months to say yes to Jesus. And that was on Yom Kippur. This Yom Kippur, it will be 40 years in a Messianic congregation. And my friend who gave me the great divorce invited me to. And I hadn't set foot in a synagogue of any kind for years and years and years. And yeah. And so God met me. And I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of resistance. I never read the Bible, didn't care, but I started to read the Bible, and God was he was so gracious to me, I mean, I was like, I'm sorry, I don't do the wife submit to the husband thing. That's not happening, and then you have to show me how that works, because that's not, my parents, bad caricature of whatever that is, I'm the bad, you're the woman. And it's like, oh, she runs the house. She makes all the important decisions, you run the flower shop, but she makes the, we all go to her. We don't go to you because you got all this rage, so yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I came to the Lord, and I really, I say this with some, I don't know, leeway in it. I haven't really ever looked back. There have been moments, but I have really never looked back that way and gone, I'd be better off if I stopped or let go or whatever,
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's quite the journey that you had there. And who was Jesus to you before you knew him as your personal Lord and Savior?
He was a cuss word
Especially
in my
being,
father's mouth.
pardon me?
He was a swear word in my father's mouth,
Ah,
first
and
and last name.
Mm.
And in my mouth, for that matter, because I learned from my father.
right, right.
Mm.
But who did you think Jesus was being as a Jewish person even?
Their God. Their God.
Not there.
Yeah,
Not
not
mine.
yours. Okay,
No, their God.
Mhm.
Gentile God.
right. And what
And,
was the
and that went along with the idea that everybody who wasn't overtly Buddhist or something else, and wasn't Jewish was obviously a Christian of some kind, cultural Christian. It didn't matter. All lumped together. If you were Gentile, you were a Christian, unless you like pronounced yourself a Buddhist or something else. But yeah.
and yet you considered yourself an atheist.
You can be an atheist and still be Jewish. You just can't believe in him, Jesus, and be considered part of the Jewish community. Yeah. So you could be an atheist. It's really funny. I saw, I don't know how long ago, it was years and years ago, but I remember seeing a synagogue say about itself that we meet, we discuss the Torah, we don't believe in God. Like, okay, how's that working for you? I don't get that, okay, I guess you can do whatever, you can be a Buddhist and still be Jewish. You can be, I mean, there's a lot of leeway in Judaism, New Ager, psychic, whatever, and still be, because you're Jewish, right? Because Jewish is first a race, actually.
Right.
Okay.
And then it's, the keepers or the followers of the law, but first it was Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and so it's lineage and it's race. A lot of people don't go there. And it's like, well, but Hitler did. He got that part.
Right.
He understood that it is race. It's not my choice. I didn't choose it. Okay. He chose it for me. So he made me Jewish. And like I said, as I say to some of my friends, I say, I'm not proud of being Jewish because it wasn't my choice. It was what God decided for me. And I'm not ashamed of being Jewish.
Right.
He chose it for me and he has a purpose in it. Just like Chantal, you are from whatever ethnicity and country and culture, and Garth, you are from whatever ethnicity and country and culture, and there's a purpose in it. And I didn't understand that when I first came to the Lord, but there is a purpose in it and a plan. It's not nothing, but it isn't the kingdom either. It isn't the sum of the kingdom, what you are on this earth,
So you came to the Lord. So I got a couple holes in your story that I wanna fill in.
Okay.
So you're married to the boyfriend you were dating at that time. So
Yes.
there's obviously a story there. Secondly, is your husband a Christian?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's something to be said there, I think, as well. And what was it that in that 6 months or 9 months that um where you realized that God was real in that to the time that you came to know Jesus, what was it that brought you um over that bridge or through that gate or
We started checking out some churches, but I got to tell you, the church wasn't a whole lot of help. The church that we went to anyway. I will refrain from naming names.
thank you.
But it was a large church, and you know, Mike and I were kind of, loosely, checking it out. And the preacher was very gifted in all of that, in his speaking. And there were things I got from the church. But the largest thing I got from the church was not a positive thing. And I went up for prayer, and I went behind the curtain. I decided that I need to do this. And I went behind the curtain with this lady who was going to pray for me. And I told her, how God, showed up in my room with my boyfriend and everything. And she said, well, that wasn't God, because you're in sin. I'm like, wow. Like she told me, she said that had to be demonic. And I'm like, well, sign me up. I'm like, lady, sign me up. Are you kidding me? I know that was God. But yeah, so that was her whole take on it. That was her, thing to me. So I was so turned off. I left the church, and that's just, I tell that as a kind of cautionary tale. It's like, don't make assumptions,
Right. Yes.
So then I remember dragging Michael and my niece. No, this was later. Never mind. There were just some things, but honestly, I knew. I mean, let's put it together. I was reading Mere Christianity. I threw the book across the room, and that night he answers me. And how does he answer me? Same way, he answers Job. He doesn't answer my questions. He shows up. That is the answer. And so I knew, but I didn't want to. And so when I went to the synagogue for Yom Kippur, after my friend invited me, I fasted that day. I said all the prayers, everything else, come back in the evening. And God, God picks certain people to be those people that they're just going to speak to you right where you are. So his name was Rabbi Barry Budoff. He's gone to be with the Lord now. And yeah, I was pretty hostile. So we were having a break fast, and we were eating, and Rabbi Barry came up to me, and he's making conversation. And I said, so you ever see an Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
Oh.
I didn't know that Barry was a sci-fi buff, total sci-fi buff. Yeah. So he says, oh yeah. And so I was a little surprised. And then I said, oh, so where do you keep your plant pots? So he didn't drop a beat. This is why, when somebody's like, oh, this is God. Okay. Not that I did, but he was like, he didn't drop a beat. He goes, in my office. Want to see? And I said, sure. So I go back there, and my friend is with me, and he's crying. I said, Ross, there's nothing to cry about. There's nothing going on here, And so we go into Barry's office, and Barry says, so do you think you've lived a good life? And I said, no. And he said, so do you believe that Jesus died for you and rose, or Yeshua died for you and rose from the dead? And I said, I don't know, maybe. And he said, do you want to believe? And I said, maybe. And that's how we prayed, and it was enough. It was enough, because then I made my friend stop as we were crossing into the valley, in the San Fernando Valley. I made my friend stop on Mulholland Drive. I got out of the car and I said, okay, if you're real, I want to know you. I really want to know. And I want you to show me, help me know that you're real. And I want you in my life.
Wow.
And he took it from there. And so I joined the Messianic congregation, and pretty quickly became one of the worship leaders. And that was fine. Michael didn't want anything to do with it. He wasn't anti-Jewish or anything. It was just foreign to him. He enjoyed Barry very much. Barry and him had a very similar sense of humor. So that was good. People told me, oh, well, and okay, so a month after to fill in the holes, after I came to the Lord, Mike asked me to marry him, and I wanted this very much. We had gone together for 2 years and practically lived together, I mean, in essence, and I wanted it very much. We had met in a songwriting class, and we were both impacted by each other's songs, and we started writing together, and we wanted to write songs that mattered. We wanted to make a lot of money too, but we wanted to write songs that mattered, and I believe that was a God deposit.
Right.
He put in our hearts. So we began collaborating and everything, and one thing led to another, and we were together. And so I'm a pretty loyal person. I think I'm not gonna, so the poll in the Messianic congregation was, oh, you'll meet a nice Jewish boy, and that's, and I was like, I don't need to meet a nice Jewish boy. I already met a nice Irish guy. and I love him, and I met him before I met Jesus, see? So I think I'm not gonna just blow him off right now, type thing. And again, Rabbi Barry was very savvy, was really led by the Spirit, because I really was not, like I said, I was not very friendly. I wasn't looking for people. People were dangerous to me because they were hurtful. And I'd had a lot of hurts. I had accumulated a lot of hurts. I'd certainly given my share with not necessarily knowing it, but I'd accumulated a lot of hurts. And so, this business of hugging, it was like, forget it, don't touch me. And I like shake your hand, and that's fine, and don't, I really had a wall up a lot of, to a lot of people, because I didn't want, wasn't playing. I wasn't playing church. I was there for God, and that was kind of it. It was like, I just want to know God. I really want to know him. And Barry was the only one pretty much I let my wall down for. So I talked to Barry about Michael, and when Mike asked me, I said, okay, here's the thing. I really want to, I really want to marry you, but this is not a hobby. Okay. About Jesus, it's not a hobby, and it's not going to go away. And so you need to make a decision, And Mike said, oh, yeah. Well, I'll do that. I promise. I'll look into it. Yeah. Which he didn't. And so, so I said to Barry, and of course our physical relationship stopped. And that was very hard. Mike was great about it, but we stopped. So I talked to Barry, and Barry was very smart. He said, just keep reading your Bible and praying. Just keep reading your Bible and praying. He did not lay on any trip to me or anything like that. And so I did. I kept reading my Bible and praying, and I came upon where it said, you cannot be unequally yoked. And I went, oh, okay. Unequally yoked. Okay. And I had to think about it a lot. And I had this whole crying session, for like 2 hours with Barry. And I knew I had to tell Michael that I wasn't going to marry him this way.
Right.
And that was very, very, very hard. But the thing that helped me, and again, God was so gracious to me. He showed me, he said, Michael has come from a broken family. his parents are divorced after 18 years. You have come from your parents, not officially divorced, but never living together again after 30 years. And what makes you think you can keep it together here?
Hmm.
And, you know, crisis, tragedy, whatever comes into a life, how's that going to get handled between, you know, two of you? And these were thoughts that I felt like the Lord helped me with. And I shared them with Michael, and he heard me, but it was very painful. And I said, look, there's nobody else. I don't want anybody else. I'll wait for you. And, you know, he said, well, I'm not going to do it for you. And I said, good, you know, because I don't want it to be that way.
Mhm.
And he said, and I said, I will wait for you. And if you make a different decision, we will be friends, but I'm not gonna go down this road. I should say this. I was married at 17. It didn't last at all. It was out of a lot of pain and brokenness in my family. But I got married at 17, and I really decided from there. I got married to a guy who loved me and was in love with me, and that was all it took, because I didn't love me at all.
Mhm.
And anyway, so I wasn't going to get married at 30 to Michael without being on the same page. And I recognized how important it was. And so it was very hard, because Michael was like running away. He didn't want it, and so it was painful, our conversations and being together and stuff like this. And then eventually God did something in Michael's life that made him understand that he is really God, and that Mike needed to make a decision. It wasn't that Mike didn't believe in God on some level, but that God made himself known to Michael in a language Michael could understand, which was baseball, by the way. Michael is a baseball fanatic. I mean, really, and big San Francisco Giants fan, so it took baseball for God showing up in baseball for Michael, so interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. Oh, English is my second language. I'm gonna try to say that slowly so you can understand my question.
I appreciate that, Chantal.
So, being Jew, what do you think really stuck in Jew mind to not go through the Torah, and next step is Jesus? Why that barrier? Why the transition is not easier for them?
The church did a lot of damage.
Mm.
That's the truth. Yes, as a nation, the leaders and everyone said, crucify him. I don't want anything to do with him, But you have to recognize, and this is important, that all the followers at the beginning were Jews.
Mhm.
That when Pentecost Sunday, which just happened, but not really, happened on the Anglican calendar, but not actually on the Hebrew calendar. It's Shavuot. When Pentecost Sunday happened, those were Jews that Peter spoke to,
Yes.
coming from to celebrate the feasts in Jerusalem. When Constantine became a Christian, whatever, I'm not his judge. There was a rupture. There was a whole. I'm not a theologian, so I can only put this in the way that I understand it.
Mhm.
there was a rupture at that point, and basically it was like, we're not, on one hand, the council in Jerusalem said the Gentiles in Antioch and everywhere else do not need to observe all the laws, okay? Because even the Jewish believers at that time were observing still the laws, the law, Torah, they were doing that, because so did Jesus. So they were doing what he did, they were following his footsteps. But the council in Jerusalem, after much prayer and deliberation, decided that, okay, the Gentiles don't need to become Jews, in essence. They need to abstain from blood and sexual immorality. You know what I'm saying. And then they, these are the main things. And then, they're walking with the Lord, On the other hand, Constantine was like, you can't really stay Jewish. You can't worship him this way. You need to basically throw that all away and be a Christian. They were not even called Christians. They were called followers of the way at the time, So that was the beginning. And then there was, at different points in history, anti-Jewish rhetoric or anti-Semitism, including Martin Luther, who was horrible at the end of his life. He said horrible things about the Jews, who he initially hoped to draw into the Reformation, who he hoped that, would be drawn in, but were not drawn in. Okay. And so he said things, they're children of the devil, and their villages need to be burned, and their Torahs need to be, this, that, and the other, and are just horrible things. I mean, I have a copy of that book, the People of the Lie, or whatever it's called, but I mean, it's a little short book. It's like, it's nauseating. Okay. Right. And of course, I mean, guess who got to use that book, or guess who used that rhetoric for the Holocaust? It was Hitler. Yeah. And so when a Jewish person looks at Jesus, well, I mean, there's the Inquisition, there's the Crusades, there's Constantine, there's Hitler, who said, who had, the banner over some of his work camps, you killed our God, now we're going to kill you. So the church has gotten in the way,
right,
a lot for the Jewish people to look at. One rabbi said it very clearly. He said, how can we objectively evaluate, Jesus, when all this has gone on in his name? This is the fruit of believing in Jesus?
Wow.
What do you say? No.
Sally, that what you're saying there, that's all brand new to me. I've never considered it in that light before. Never. For me, I always thought the church was pro-Jewish, standing for Israel. And I saw it as a whole different way. But it's interesting that there's a different perspective and a different way of seeing things. And I have seen hints, if you would, or rhetoric, not rhetoric, hints, more like maybe rhetoric as well from the church in the past that I didn't agree with, that I thought that it didn't belong. I didn't think that it belonged. And now hearing from you, I'm seeing things in a little different light all of a sudden. And
well, Garth, there's a thing called replacement theology.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
And it's like, what a foolish thing. I mean, it's like, you think that the God in the Old Testament, who made both conditional and unconditional promises to Israel, the people, that he's done with it because they screwed up, like he didn't know they were going to screw up, like he didn't have that piece of knowledge. He just thought that they were going to do this, I mean, really? I mean, so if he's not faithful to the faithless, what kind of God are we following?
Mhm.
because
Amen.
I'm depending on that. I'm depending on the fact that he's faithful to even the faithless. And in
Mhm.
fact, one of those passages, and I don't know exactly where it is, but I mean, remember reading it and going, wow, that's exactly what he's saying. Even though you do blah, 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 Israel, still I'm good, because it's his nature. It's not
Mm.
about, it's not, it's not quid pro quo. It's like, no, it's I'm faithful and I cannot be less than faithful to who I am, which is faithful. And in the end, that's why do we think we're going to throw our crowns down?
Exactly. Good
You
point.
know? So I mean, it's just like, this is stupid. You're shooting yourself in the foot.
Hmm.
You're shooting your own, your own faith. You're dismantling it by saying, Israel has been replaced. It's like, no, that's
And
not going to happen.
we're doing the same things that they did in Acts, and we're saying, oh, well, they have to change to meet God, and yet we know that God meets us where we're at,
Mhm.
right? And so
Right.
it's like when they were talking in Acts of, well, they have to follow the law as well as follow Jesus, and so on. Um, and
Yeah.
now as the church, we're doing the same thing and putting up these barriers. And then, of course, we're blaming it on the Jewish people, saying, well, they don't have a heart for the Lord. They don't understand like we understand.
Or
Um,
even more,
are
even more.
missing the mark, that sort of
They
stuff.
killed Christ. They're the Christ killers. I
Mhm.
mean, it comes back to this. And it's like, okay, the one that we are supposed to listen to the most said that no one takes his life, that he lays down his life. He has authority from the Father to lay it down and pick it up.
That's right.
No one takes his life. So in the end, whatever the Jews, the Jewish leaders, okay, had in their hearts and did and perpetrated, and the Romans and perpetrated, whatever pilots, who knew something was up and didn't do anything, I mean, in the end, it was still you know, God's sovereign will that Yeshua, Jesus, would die for the sins of humanity,
Hmm.
and that no one could rescue him from it. And the only person who could rescue him from it was Yeshua himself. And he said no in the Olive Garden. He said, no, let your will be done.
Hmm.
Struggled. He dealt with it, and he submitted himself to the Father's will.
How did Michael come to the Lord? So I know it had to do with baseball. Um, or you don't have to share his testimony with us, but tell us how that you came back together and so on.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. We were hanging out. We didn't stop hanging out. We just stopped, hanging out in certain ways. But we were hanging out and talking, and it was hard. There were two things I think, Mike doesn't usually mention. We saw a Frankie Schaefer movie together, and he was so upset by it, he walked out. And it was a sci-fi movie. It just really got to him, and he walked out. And there was a great struggle between light and darkness. He he had a saying. He said, I feel like you're holding a knife to me. I either accept Christ, or and I can marry you or not. And that was really hard. I hated that, analogy. And then one day when he said it to me, I said back to him, I said, maybe holding a knife to you is the only way you're gonna deal with it. You're ever gonna come to any kind of conclusion about this. And anyway, but like I said, he's a baseball fiend, and or yeah, fiend. At the time, he was kind of, yeah. So his team, but in the World Series of 1986, um, the Red Sox, no, was it the Red Sox? Yeah, it was the Red Sox. They were playing, was it the Mets? I think they were playing the Mets. I don't remember exactly. Mike would remember exactly. Anyway, I was somewhat a Red Sox fan from my years in Boston, going to Boston University and then Berkeley College of Music. And I had become a Red Sox fan during that time. Not a very big baseball person, but that season I was for a little while. So we were both kind of rooting for the Red Sox, but he was like really on it. He was really, because they went to the World Series, and there was this whole mythology about the Red Sox that that Babe Ruth had cursed them, they would never win, from that point and all this kind of stuff. And they hadn't. They'd come close, but they hadn't won. And so anyway, so they're playing this team. I think it was the Mets. I don't remember. Mike actually wrote a book called Sermon on the Mount, so it tells the whole story. But anyway, he's watching it on TV, the World Series, and the Red Sox should have this in the bag, but one thing after another unravels their lead. And it happens in the, I don't know, it happens in the later innings. And one of them is just, it's like, stupid. How could this happen? This ground ball, is hit by the opposing team. And I mean, it's like there's 2 outs, it's the 9th inning, and they should be able to wrap this up because they got a lead. And this ground ball, easy ground ball, is hit, and it goes right through the legs of a guy named Bill Buckner, who was profoundly affected by this moment in time. It goes right through his legs, and as a result, the game is tied up. Okay. And eventually, okay, so the game is 3-3, it's 3-3. And of course, the 7th game is the deciding game. And in this, as this is happening, Michael feels like, as he's watching the TV, he feels like the TV's coming up closer and closer to him. That's what he says. And he feels like, so one side is going to go off into glory, and one side will never be really remembered because they didn't win. Right. So one side goes off, in the 7th game to, yay, light and glory. Which side are you on?
Right.
And so he wrote a lyric called The 7th Game. And he invited me over, I don't know, a couple days later, and he read me this lyric. And then I knew that he had made his decision, and made his decision for God, And, we took about 6 months. He had taken about 2 years from the time I said I can't. And so we took another 6 months, and then we got married in my mother's backyard. She had a tea house on the hill, and we got married. And Michael's very funny. I mean, if you look at some of our early songs, his lyrics are always the funny ones, which leads to the other part of this. But anyway, I'll just tell you this part. So we had a wonderful, I mean, it was so blessed. It was really beautiful. We had a lot of friends and everything. And Mike said to me, well, we're songwriters, we met in a songwriting class. So how about you write me a song and I'll write you a song, and we don't show each other. Well, won't tell each other, what it is. So on the day, so we do, I think that's a charming idea. Okay. So on the day we get married, I sing this song to him. It's a love ballad, and, and we recorded it on one of the albums, and it's called From Now On, and I sing it and I'm choking, and, all of this, and then it's Mike's turn. And he sings this song called It's Quite an Honor to Be an O'Connor. And the chorus of this is, it's quite an honor to be an O'Connor. Sing it out long and out loud. It's quite an honor to be an O'Connor. You must be so very proud. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I was singing this song and talking about, we'll have, green baked potato and gefilte fish for lunch, and we'll both get thinner. What is it? Okay, we'll both get thinner on gefilte fish dinner with a green baked potato to munch. And he's just telling, he's just like going on about, he started out the song, "Congratulations, Sally Klein. You're about to receive the first prize." It goes on like this. So anyway, by the last chorus, he says, "Everybody," and they all sing with him, and I'm like, "I'm going to kill you. I don't know if I'm going to marry you." And Barry, who buried us, Rabbi Barry, he's laughing so hard he can't get his act back together, because of Mike's song, So anyway, he promised Mike he wouldn't have to say any of the Hebrew, but he punishes Mike by making him say the Hebrew. So it was just, anyway, it was very sweet. It was really good. And we began our life together, and we were trying to break in, get me in as an artist, get us songs heard. We didn't understand why no one would, we had a lot of people make promises, a lot of people in the business, Christians and non-Christians, make us promises that they never kept. And that was very, very hard. And it really broke us in a lot of ways, because, we thought we were writing some songs that were meaningful, actually, and everybody said, "Oh, you have a lovely voice," and, and all of this. There were some hints that this was a problem, or I could exploit this if I wanted to get known as an artist. I could exploit my scar,
right.
And I was like, no, thank you. And so it was very disheartening. And so Mike was working for a grocery store. We had Dusty Rose, our first little girl. And I was working at a Hebrew Christian ministry called Rock of Israel. And eventually I was doing some concerts for them, Messianic praise music, and giving my testimony as a Jewish believer. And I was invited to do a song at a Jews for Jesus in gathering. I don't know if you're familiar with Jews for Jesus organization. A man named Moish Rosen began, somewhat controversial in many ways, but the concept of Jewish people believing in Jesus certainly got heard a lot more just by the name of the organization and things that were done by the organization. I had friends in the organization. I didn't want to be a part of the organization because it was a little brutal at the beginning. Some of my friends had talked about how pretty much they, were very, this was very consuming work. And I was like, not for me. So, but anyway, they had this in-gathering, they called it, and they were trying to help new artists get started or get heard or whatever. And so I was invited because I had been doing some worship for a Bible study for Jews for Jesus. And a friend of mine, Avi Snyder, was part of that. He was leading that. And so he told me about it. And I told Michael, and Michael said, "You should go." It was like a 7 or 8 hour drive. I'm like, "Why am I going to go? I don't have a lousy 7 or 8 hour drive to go up there to sing one crummy song, And I was really like, no, and plus I'm going to haul Dusty Rose with me, my best friend, and all this, and nobody's paying for anything, So anyway, all of that to say, I went. And I spent 7 or 8 hours contemplating how we're going nowhere with our songs and nobody's going to help us and nothing's going to ever get done. And I just have to give up and accept that that's not what's going to happen. I'm 31 or 30, 31, 32, something. And we have a little girl and we need to, she was 6 months and we need to get real, need to grow up, So that's my whole thinking going up there, And I get up there and Jim Hayford, the brother of Jack Hayford, is talking about vision and dreams and the calling of God. And I am bawling my eyes out the whole time this guy is talking. I mean, just every session he's talking, I'm just a mess. And then it comes time to sing the song. Well, so the different artists that were invited are all dressed up. But see, the song that I'm going to sing is a song that Michael wrote the words to, and it's called Improbable People for Impossible Tasks. And it came from a message that our pastor gave. And Mike's brain, goes off in interesting directions. So he was going to write a very serious song about how God uses improbable people for just impossible tasks. But he was listening to Jimmy Buffett. He likes, Jimmy Buffett's a wonderful songwriter. He was a wonderful songwriter, even though he was also many other things. So he's listening to Jimmy Buffett, and he ends up writing this Jewish reggae song. Yeah. And so I decide, well, I'm going to do this song, I'm going to do it in a Hawaiian shirt. And so I get dressed up, in the shirt, and everybody's in like formal gear. And I'm like, my friend who's playing doumbek, she's playing a drum, we're both in Hawaiian shirts. And I get up and do this song, and the song is, I'm not going to remember all the words exactly because I have this problem, but it was a hot and bush was burning day when God said, Moses, look my way. You got to travel home and call call Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Oh no, let my people go, and then it's like, it goes on and it talks about Sarah and it talks about how God uses nerds and all of this. So anyway, so I do the song and everybody just goes nuts. And then the founder of the organization, he's like, he calls me in. I've never met him. He calls me in. He summons me. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So he says, so have you ever done an album? And I said, no, we'd done tons of demos, but we'd never done an album. He said, well, you should do an album. And I said, yeah, well, been here, done that. And so then, he says, I'm going to give you the money. I said, okay. And is it just a personality album or whatever? Anyway, so I said, okay. So he did, so 2 weeks later, a check shows up. I put it up on my wall above the piano and I just stare at it for 2 weeks until my father comes in and he says, deposit it. Like, deposit it. I'm like, oh, right. So that was kind of the beginning. We did this album. We did a concert. We went up there to do a concert in San Francisco, which is where their headquarters are. And he pre-sold an album that didn't exist, which we were like panicking because we were like, oh, okay, well, we have these songs, but we're not sure, and blah, blah, blah. And he pre-sells the album at the concert. And I'm going, yeah, it's not done. Okay, not sure how this works, And, but then he also at the concert, he says, which is not characteristic of him. He's a very Baptist guy. So he says, I have a word for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he says, I see you traveling all over the country, doing your songs and telling stories. And you're going to go places we can't go. And I'm like, uh-huh. I'm thinking, you don't really know us. You don't know me, and you don't know Michael, and you don't know us. But so he says, I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you a van, and I'm going to give you a computer, and I'm going to give you access to our database, which really freaked out the guy who was in charge of the database, And he goes, I'm going to help you, and there are no strings attached. It was like, you're not asking me to be part of your thing here, or any of this, and it was no. So we're high, we drive back from San Francisco. I don't know, it was like 11 o'clock at night, we're driving back home to Los Angeles, and we're just like, stoked on cookies and everything, and the idea that, are we going to do this? And everything. And well, we had a false start, and then we had one more opportunity. It was interesting. Mike was working a very lucrative job. They had health insurance and all of this. And I was working at the Rock of Israel. And we had a false start. We didn't get off the ground because Mike was going to get laid off. And Mike's idea was that he would stay working.
Right.
And I would start doing this. And, made a lot of sense, but it wasn't exactly God's plan. Mm-hmm. So what happened was, we kind of gave up after the false start and didn't do anything. And then Moish would call at the Rock of Israel, no less, and say, I really think you should do this. I don't think you should belong to the Rock of Israel or to Jews for Jesus, and I think you should do this. And I'm like, oh, my boss was not happy. He was calling. They became friends, but he wasn't happy at the time when she was calling about this. And anyway, so there was this one more opportunity, and we were talking with my boss, who's a very good friend. He's godfather to my to our middle daughter, Bonnie Joy. And so we had come over to get tickets for Mike's birthday to go to Raging Waters or something. And the phone rings and somebody says, so I heard you have this album, Hey God, are you talking to me? Which was the name of the first album. And can we get it at Rock of Israel? And it brought up this whole conversation. And by the end of the conversation, not on the phone with this person, I said, I had given my 2 weeks notice. And I said to Mike, okay, this time, no matter what happens, we're going to give this a try, because we're never going to know if this is real unless we try. And if we fail, well, then we didn't hear God and we made a mistake, and we'll manage. But if we did hear God, and so he got laid off.
Oh.
Yeah, he did. He got laid off. And then we began doing things, and have ever since done it by offering with no minimum and with generally no expenses involved. Just that people would, put me up somewhere. And I've slept on everything from a pew to the very nice place at the Sheraton for a suite, So, but, God has been faithful. Mm-hmm. And so that was how we began, and that's how we thought we would continue. And we wrote articles, newsletters. We told people, just our journeys, our experiences. We decided that the newsletter was also a tool of ministry, not solely an appeal thing. We didn't want to do that, so we didn't ask. We basically made it a point of just, telling more of the journey, telling about Dusty and Michael in the garden, learning how to, teaching Dusty what it meant to begin a garden, and how that applies, to our life with the Lord. Bonnie, as it turned out, was diagnosed with autism. Talked about hope in the hard places when you feel like you can't see and it's dark, and all of these kind of things. And we shared our lives. We felt like our lives were like this, kind of an epistle. And eventually Mike wrote a book called Sermon on the Mount, and that was published by Bethany House. And then I wrote a book that Broadman and Holman published initially, but didn't do anything with for a lot of reasons. And that was called Beauty in the Beast. And that was about my struggle to see myself through God's eyes. So we did a lot of things in the ministry. Everything that we did was by the grace of God. It was how he provided. It was, we have 8 albums, I think, and all original songs, except for 1 or 2 on each album that we wanted a songwriter that was not us to do. So that was pretty much it. We, until God confronted me about things that were still not healed, which has been my journey. He confronts me about things that are still not healed. And not always fun.
A second. So are you saying to me that that dog that bit you was a blessing instead of a curse now? Because that is the seed that started you down a road where you went first dark, and now God is healing you from all of that. And you've discovered that I'm not trying to psychoanalyze you here, but
Go for it, Garth. It's fun.
but that you've discovered there's other hurts and healing to be done. And so that's where the root of your ministry has come from.
Well, I think Mike would agree with you, like word for word. I would say, there was a piece I know God gave me. There was a song he gave me and a piece he gave me to write for the newsletter. The piece was when wounds become windows.
Mm.
And that was my experience, that people would come up to me. I didn't even know I was going to talk about my scar when we began. But the first time I really talked about my scar, and I didn't know what I was going to say, was at this church. It was a love feast. And Mike had written a song. He'd written the words called "Let Me Be Your Eyes." And it was from Mike, but it was really kind of like God.
Mm-hmm.
And to me. And I shared this song, but I didn't know what to say about the song. And so I wound up saying about my scar, which I hadn't really premeditated or thought a lot about. Well, at the end of the concert, I have little Dusty in my arms, and this woman comes up to me and she's angry at me. She's really beautiful, but she's really angry at me. And she says, I asked God to make you stop talking. I walked out of the room, and all this, vitriol at me. And it, eventually she comes around and tells me, that she lost her face, like a concrete block, somehow smacked her face. And she had to have complete reconstructive surgery completely on her face, and her face is not her face. So she looks in the mirror, and to me, she looks beautiful, but to her, it's not her face.
Okay.
So she's freaking out. And "Let Me Be Your Eyes" is like, forget that, kind of thing. So anyway, I end up praying for her. I end up talking to her. Many years later, she comes to a concert and she's fine, but it was just so profound. I mean, she was a basket case when she came up to me. I mean, she was really, really upset. And And I'm going, whoa, what's going on? I'm like, what are we doing? Oh, we're just telling some stories and singing some songs. We're not, but people started having these reactions to the songs and to the stories, and even then to the newsletters. And we got letters, and stuff. And then we realized that, God was doing something more with the songs than we understood. And much more than we understood. And I remember, I will always remember this pastor came up to me. I was in Bakersfield after the concert. He comes up to me. He didn't ask me, it's a boundary issue, but he ran his finger down my scar, which, I wasn't all healed when we began this, because I did not understand the ramifications. I wouldn't say I was in denial like Mike, but I just kind of moved on, but I had a lot of issues connected with the scar, but I didn't know what they were. And God chose the ministry to show me all the issues that I had connected with the scar, and I didn't, that was hard, so one of them was this guy runs his finger down my scar, I mean, and then he says, my wife has scars no one can see.
Oh.
And he's just in pain, for our third album, Michael did this terrible thing. He went out to this artist and he had the guy paint from a picture and paint into the scar a cross. So the redeeming of the scar, and he thought this would be the cover. And up until then, like Mike was like, you have to be on the cover. And I'm like, okay, but we don't have to do a close up here. It's like, I can be on the cover and we could do me on the beach over here. Hey God, that was the original cover for that. And Come Meet the Author of Life, another song, was a bookstore, and I was in front of a bookstore, and this was this. So he goes, I have the cover, big surprise and full expectation that I'm going to grasp this, and completely undoes me. We have a huge fight. He shows me this portrait, which he still has, and I'm like, no way, that's my face and I don't want it on there, and no, you're not doing that, and I said, I have to live with that. I'm not doing that. And one thing led to another, and God, God is in the mix. So that's what went on the cover. But the recognition that I was still not healed. I'm telling the story and I'm still not healed. How long does it take to get healed? And to what degree did this go? I mean, like, what is this all about? So he really made me understand that there were layers, even as he's healing. And this is the thing for me. This is my understanding of this journey. He is working on me, even as he's doing whatever he's doing through me and the songs and the stories and a tour of roses, for that matter. He's doing whatever he's doing, and it's his gig while he's working on me. And I'm, and it's wonderful and amazing. And he's all about redemption, but I don't always walk that out very gracefully.
Sally, last night I read about you. I know you are an historian, and I want to talk a little bit about the healing part. God gave you a kind of heart where you see around the world, the story tell us how mankind never be kind each other. And there is a Holocaust, there is a colonization, there is how people treat the First Nation. Those kind of things touch your heart. And you did travel different places just to put a smile, to learn and to put a smile through your ministry. And we would like to hear from yourself. what did you do in Germany? What did you do in Canada? What you doing in US? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, maybe this is a good place to transition to Tour of Roses. I'm not sure.
Yes.
But that might be skipping ahead. So you tell us.
Yes.
Oh, that's fine. There's a lot to say.
Yeah.